The first time I realized my fence was gone, I thought I had sleepwalked with a chainsaw. One night it was standing. Solid cedar, pressure-treated posts sunk 3 feet deep, the kind of structure that could withstand a small hurricane, and by sunrise, it was nothing but a sad row of splintered stumps, like bad teeth in a jaw. I didn't even have time to finish rubbing the sleep out of my eyes before I spotted her, the queen of cul-de-sacs, strutting across my lawn in a bathrobe patterned with roses. Karen, the HOA board president. She waved her ceramic coffee mug at me like it was a sheriff's badge. "Property lines must stay open," she announced, steam rising from her mug and from my head at the same time. I should have yelled, but that's not my style. Instead, I leaned against my porch railing and blinked at her like she was auditioning for a new reality series. "Funny," I said, "I don't remember signing up for a communal petting zoo. Did the HOA add that rule after I stopped reading your 2,000-word emails about mailbox paint?" She pursed her lips so hard I thought they might invert. Karen thrives on control. She's the kind of person who believes a hedge taller than 3 feet is a moral failing, and she doesn't just want rules enforced, she wants to be the one enforcing them. Her explanation boiled down to this. The board had decided that fences disrupted neighborhood harmony and created barriers to connection. Never mind that my fence had stood for years without incident. Never mind that my property tax bill very clearly traced the boundaries she now declared must remain open. When I asked for paperwork authorizing her to bulldoze my lumber, she smirked and said, "The vote was unanimous." I later found out the vote consisted of her and her friend Cheryl scribbling on napkins during wine night. I didn't bother shouting. People like Karen feed on outrage like it's oxygen. Instead, I noted the orange paint streaks on the broken board. Someone had marked them deliberately. That told me it wasn't just Karen with her pruning shears. It was a coordinated hit job, probably involving her cousin, who ran a discount contracting business notorious for doing HOA favors. That meant this wasn't a neighborhood decision. It was personal. What Karen hadn't considered, and what I wasn't about to share, was that the fence wasn't just for me. I live on the edge of town, where manicured lawns fade into a stretch of scrubby wood. Deer cut through regularly. Coyotes skulk around at night. The fence kept them out of my tomatoes and kept my dog from chasing them. Removing it meant tearing down the only barrier between Karen's decorative koi pond and the wild corridor beyond. But explaining that to her would have been like warning a toddler not to touch the stove. She'd only be more determined to slam her hand down. That morning, while Karen strutted back to her driveway humming with victory, I walked the property line and picked up a broken board. There were claw marks on it, fresh ones. Not from a hammer, but from something that had been trying to climb over or push through. The boards had done their job, right up until Karen's little crusade opened the door. 2 days later, our neighborhood Facebook group lit up with her post. At first it was smug, a picture of her yard captioned, "Finally open and welcoming." Just how a community should be. Then, the tone shifted. "Did anyone else hear noises last night? Like growling? Or is that just raccoons?" A video followed, shaky and grainy, showing her trash cans knocked over, their contents shredded. She tagged it #wildlifeissues. Meanwhile, Cheryl chimed in with comments like, "Don't worry, Karen, the HOA will handle this. We'll set humane traps." Which was hilarious because Cheryl once tried to humanely trap squirrels by spraying peppermint oil and singing hymns at them. The thread ballooned with neighbors arguing about whether coyotes or feral dogs were to blame. I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. By the weekend, the HOA called an emergency meeting in Karen's driveway. Folding chairs lined up in perfect rows, her koi pond burbling behind her like a soundtrack. She stood at the head like a general, holding a clipboard as if it were a sword. "Neighbors," she began, "we face a crisis of safety. The removal of fences has created unintended consequences. Something is moving through our yards at night." She paused for effect, scanning the faces. No one mentioned the obvious. that she herself had ordered the fences gone. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice calm. Strange, I said. My yard was fine until someone demolished a structure I paid for. But I'm sure the HOA will cover the replacement costs, right? Murmurs rose like smoke. Karen's lips thinned again. She dodged the question by insisting the community needed unity and cooperation. Translation: she didn't want to be on the hook for damages. That night, I sat on my porch with a flashlight, listening. Around midnight, I heard it. Heavy steps, not the skitter of raccoons, not the yip of coyotes. Something bigger. My dog growled low in his throat. The sound of snuffling drifted through the air, followed by the metallic clang of a trash lid. I didn't move, didn't shout. I simply watched the dark silhouette lumbering toward Karen's yard. Broad shoulders, rounded ears, a massive shape moving with lazy power. By morning, the neighborhood group had exploded again. Karen posted in all caps, "A bear was in my yard. It ate my koi. This is a public safety emergency." She attached blurry photos that looked like a cryptid sighting, but the mangled pond and shredded bags told the story well enough. Cheryl commented, "We need to call animal control ASAP." A quieter voice in the thread asked, "Didn't Opie warn us about wildlife before?" That comment got mysteriously deleted within minutes. I didn't say a word publicly, but privately, I couldn't help the smile creeping across my face. Karen had torn down my fence to make the neighborhood more open. Now the wilderness was open too, and it had walked right through the gap she created. And that, I realized, was only the beginning. The morning after Karen's koi massacre, I found a neon orange notice taped to my front door. In block letters it declared, "Community Code Violation, Failure to Maintain Safe Property Boundaries." I laughed so hard I had to lean against the doorframe. The fence had been removed by them, and now I was being cited for not having one. That's Karen logic: destroy something you own, then fine you for not owning it. I tucked the notice in my pocket like a souvenir and walked to my mailbox, where I ran into my neighbor, Dave. He's the kind of guy who wears socks with sandals and has a PhD in not minding his own business. "Rough luck with the notice," he said, smirking. "Karen's on a warpath. Says you brought the bear here by leaving your yard inviting." I tilted my head. "Inviting? Dave, the only thing my yard is inviting these days is mosquitoes. The bear came because Karen thought my fence was an eyesore. Now she's got free wildlife tours, no admission fee." Dave chuckled but lowered his voice. "Careful, man. She's talking about pushing through a special HOA rule that makes you financially responsible for any damage the bear causes, even if it's not on your property." That stopped me cold. My stomach clenched, but not with fear, with fury. Karen wasn't just flexing control now. She was weaponizing bureaucracy to bankrupt me. My silence and sarcasm had been fun, but it was time to think several moves ahead. I started documenting. Photos of the broken boards, timestamp. Screenshots of Karen's Facebook posts bragging about demolishing fences. I even recorded the HOA meeting audio on my phone. Every smug word she spoke about open yards was now tucked safely in my files. If Karen wanted a legal war, I'd be the one dropping evidence bombs. That evening, animal control rolled into the cul-de-sac. 2 officers in khaki uniforms unloaded a steel trap the size of a small car. The neighborhood gathered like it was a parade. Kids perched on bikes, parents whispered nervously, Karen hovered in her garden gloves giving orders as though she'd deputized herself. "This is unacceptable," she barked. "That bear is a menace, and we must eliminate the source." She turned, gesturing toward me with a flourish. Heads swiveled in my direction like I was about to be stoned in the town square. I raised my hand casually. "Eliminate the source? You mean the woods? Or maybe your koi pond that smells like a buffet line?" A ripple of laughter escaped the crowd. Karen's face stiffened, her cheeks blotching red. The officers ignored the theatric. They set the trap at the edge of the woods, baiting it with a hunk of fish. Karen, however, wasn't satisfied. That night she marched door to door, clipboard in hand, demanding signatures on a petition. Her mission: force me to pay for a community security fence around her property. She knocked on my door last. She didn't even say hello. "This is your responsibility," she snapped, shoving the clipboard toward me. "If you'd kept your yard safe, none of this would have happened." I kept my tone calm, measured. "Karen, my yard was safe. You tore down the thing that kept it safe. And now you want me to buy you a new fence? That's like breaking into someone's car, ripping out the airbags, then billing them for whiplash." She jabbed her pen against the paper. "Do you want to be known as the neighbor who brought predators to our children's doorsteps?" I smiled thinly. "Karen, I don't need to sign anything to already be known as the neighbor who minds his own business. Maybe try it sometime." Then I closed the door. The next day, the bear came back. This time it wasn't content with coy. It lumbered straight across Karen's open lawn, toppled her bird feeder like it was a toy, and pawed through her herb garden. Neighbors watched from their windows, cameras rolling, as she shrieked from her deck, banging pots together. The bear didn't budge. In fact, it lifted its head, looked right at her, and sat down, like her meltdown was dinner theater. The videos went viral in our town group chat within the hour. Karen wasn't just the queen of the HOA anymore, she was the punchline of Bearwatch 2025. Someone even made a meme, her frozen in terror, captioned "HOA, hugging our apex predators." When she realized I hadn't posted or commented, she cornered me at the mailboxes. Her eyes were wild, her voice a hiss. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I tilted my head. "Enjoying what? My demolished fence? My orange violation notice? Or the fact that your personal crusade is now public comedy gold?" She jabbed her finger at me. "This is sabotage. You're deliberately not helping." That almost made me laugh. "Karen, how exactly do you expect me to help? Wrestle the bear? Offer it a lease agreement?" Her fury reached a breaking point. She threatened to sue me directly. "If my property value drops, I'll see you in court," she spat. "I'll make sure you pay for every dime." That night, I drafted a neat little packet. Photos, recordings, screenshots, timestamps, all bundled and backed up on a cloud drive. A friend of mine is a lawyer, the kind who loves nothing more than puncturing HOA egos. I sent him the file with a note: potential client. Exhibit A: one unhinged board president, one demolished fence, one very large bear. The lawyer called me the next morning, practically giddy. "This is airtight. If she pushes you to court, she's not going to win damages, she's going to end up covering yours." Meanwhile, the neighborhood's patience with Karen was cracking. The same parents who once praised her vigilance were now furious their kids couldn't play outside. Cheryl had stopped defending her on Facebook, quietly deleting old posts. Even Dave muttered to me, "Man, I didn't sign up for a nature documentary in my driveway." The pressure mounted. Karen doubled down. She tried to call another emergency meeting, but only 4 people showed up. She printed flyers demanding action against unsafe residents and taped them to light poles, but kids tore them down and turned them into paper airplanes. Then, at 2 a.m. one Thursday, it happened. Karen called animal control in hysterics, claiming the bear was trapped in her garage. By the time officers arrived, the entire cul-de-sac was awake, standing in pajamas and slippers, whispering nervously. Sure enough, the garage door had been left ajar, a bag of birdseed spilled across the floor. And there, snuffling contentedly in the corner, was the bear. I'll never forget Karen's face as the officers let it out. Pale, trembling, equal parts terror and humiliation. The cameras were rolling again. This time, even the local news showed up. By dawn, the headlines spread: HOA President's open yard policy leads to bear break-in. The footage showed her wringing her hands, muttering excuses while the bear was coaxed into a cage. My lawyer texted me a screenshot with a single word: gold. And for the first time in weeks, I knew the tide had turned. The morning after the bear incident in Karen's garage, I woke up to the sound of lawnmowers. At first, I thought the landscaping crew was just making their usual racket. But when I stepped outside with my coffee, I nearly choked on it. Karen had hired 3 men in neon vests to cut down the small trees lining my back property. These weren't even on the HOA's common land, they were on mine. The stumps were smoking where the chainsaws had just been, wood chips sprayed across my grass like confetti after a crime scene parade. I walked over slowly, because that's the thing about power-hungry people. They expect you to explode. They thrive on it. The calmer you are, the more it rattles them. Karen was there, of course, in her floppy sun hat and oversized sunglasses, barking orders like a foreman. "Those need to come down too," she told one worker, pointing toward a cluster of saplings near my dog's run. I sipped my coffee. Funny. I don't remember giving a demolition permit for my yard. Karen turned, lips tight, eyes hidden but her expression obvious. "These are unsafe," she declared. "They provide cover for dangerous animals. The board agreed it's best to remove them." I raised an eyebrow. "The board? You mean you, Cheryl, and Dave's half-hearted nods." She bristled. "As president, I have the authority to protect the neighborhood." I nodded, slow and deliberate. "And as the property owner, I have the authority to call the sheriff." Her smirk faltered for half a beat. "The sheriff won't care. This is a civil matter." I set my mug down on the fence post. Well, the stump of what used to be the fence post, and pulled out my phone. "You're right. The sheriff won't care about HOA drama. But he will care about criminal trespassing and destruction of private property." I lifted the phone so she could see the little red light blinking. I'd been recording the whole exchange. The workers froze. One of them muttered, "Ma'am, maybe we should leave this to lawyers," and started packing up. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on land. She finally snapped, "This isn't over," before storming off, her sun hat bobbing with each furious step. It was over for that moment, though. The workers peeled out in their truck, leaving my yard littered with stumps and sawdust. I snapped photos, time-stamped, filed them away in my growing evidence folder. My lawyer was going to love this. By afternoon, the story had spread again. It turns out one of the workers lived 2 streets over and told his wife everything. Within hours, the neighborhood group chat lit up. Did Karen seriously try to chop down OP's trees? Isn't that illegal? Does she think she owns the entire subdivision? Someone even dug up the county's property maps and posted them with a big red circle around my lot. The consensus was clear. Karen had crossed a line, and not just with her chainsaw crew. But Karen wasn't done. She never admits defeat, she just escalates. That evening, a flyer appeared on every doorstep. "Community Safety Initiative," it read in bold. The gist. She was calling for a new, mandatory neighborhood watch, with fines for any homeowner whose yard attracted wildlife. According to her, I was ground zero for the bear crisis, and unless I agreed to let the HOA control environmental conditions on my property, I'd face penalties. I didn't bother responding. I knew exactly how to play this. That night, I emailed my lawyer the new flyer, along with photos of the chopped trees and recordings of our conversation. He called me back immediately, almost gleeful. "She's handing you the case on a silver platter. Harassment, destruction of property, defamation, you name it. If she keeps this up, not only will you be cleared, you might end up with her paying your legal fees and damages." The next twist came faster than even I expected. 2 nights later, another bear showed up. Not the same one, they tagged the first before relocating it. This one was larger, darker, moving with the heavy certainty of an animal that had been here before. It wandered straight across the street, bypassed my yard entirely, and padded into Karen's. I watched from my porch as motion lights flicked on. The bear ambled right up to her garage door, the same one she'd left open before, and swiped at it with a paw. This time, Karen screamed so loud I heard it 3 houses away. Lights flicked on across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Someone shouted, Call the cops. The bear, unbothered, dragged one of her patio cushions into the yard and shredded it like a toy. Animal control arrived again, but this time they weren't sympathetic. I overheard one officer telling her, "Ma'am, you can't keep leaving attractants out. Birdseed, koi, unsecured trash. It draws them in." Karen, in full meltdown mode, jabbed her finger toward my house. "It's his fault. He's encouraging them." The officer glanced at my yard, bare and clean, no food, no garbage, no damage. Then back at Karen's koi pond, overturned trash bins, herb gardens strewn everywhere. His silence said it all. The next morning, the video hit the news again. The clip of Karen shrieking while the bear dismantled her cushion made the rounds, complete with slow-motion replays and sarcastic captions. Open yards, open buffet. Karen vs. Nature, Round 2. Even the local paper ran a headline. HOA leader blames neighbor for bear, forgets she owns koi buffet. By now, the tide wasn't just turning, it was a tsunami. Neighbors who once feared her fines started whispering openly about removing her from the HOA board. One even slipped a note into my mailbox. "If you start a petition, I'll sign it." But Karen wasn't about to go quietly. That week, she filed a formal complaint with the county, accusing me of negligent property management. It was a ridiculous claim, but it forced an inspection. 2 officials showed up, clipboards in hand. Karen shadowed them like a proud prosecutor, pointing out every leaf on my lawn, every dandelion. The officials spent 10 minutes walking my property, then another 30 in hers. When they finished, one of them cleared his throat. "Ma'am, your yard is the issue here. The pond, the unsecured feed, the open trash, these are bear attractants." Karen's jaw nearly unhinged. She sputtered excuses, but the officials handed her a written warning and left. That night, her porch light stayed off. No Facebook posts, no flyers. For the first time, Karen seemed rattled. Not beaten, but rattled. Which, for her, was practically a crack in the armor. I sat on my porch, sipping a beer, my dog at my feet. The cicadas hummed. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard a low growl. For once, it wasn't a sound that filled me with dread. Because I realized something, I didn't have to fight Karen. Not directly. Nature was doing the work for me. Every swing she took only dug her deeper. Every rule she tried to bend snapped back against her. All I had to do was document, stay calm, and let her destroy herself. And she was only just beginning. 3 days after the county officials slapped Karen with that written warning, the neighborhood entered a strange silence. For the first time since this war began, she wasn't storming around with clipboards or posting manifestos in all caps. No flyers taped to lampposts, number 3 EM Facebook rants about predators. It was unsettling, like the calm before a hurricane. I knew Karen too well. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. I didn't have to wait long to see her next move. Saturday morning, a convoy of SUVs rolled up to her driveway. Out stepped 3 men in crisp polos embroidered with the HOA's logo. Karen strutted out behind them like a general leading her army, clutching a binder so thick it looked like it contained every bad decision she'd ever made. The men set up a folding table, clipboards, even a microphone. Within half an hour, she had transformed her driveway into what looked suspiciously like a courtroom. I wandered over with my coffee, curious. Neighbors trickled in too, whispering as they settled in folding chairs. Karen tapped the microphone and declared, "This is a special disciplinary hearing of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." She pronounced every word with relish, savoring her authority. "The subject is Mr. Opie, whose negligence and hostility have endangered our community." A ripple ran through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably. Even Cheryl, her loyal second-in-command, kept her eyes glued to her lap. Karen flipped her binder open with a flourish. She had printed copies of every Facebook argument, every doctored photo, even a graph showing bear sightings increasing since Opie installed his fence years ago. Never mind the fact that the sightings had only started after she tore it down. I let her ramble. That's the trick with people like Karen. Give them enough rope, they'll weave their own noose. She read off fake statistics, waved photos around, and called me a threat to neighborhood harmony. When she finally slammed the binder shut, she turned to the crowd. I motioned to fine OP $5,000 for negligence and demand the removal of all vegetation on his property that could harbor predators. The silence was heavy. Everyone looked at me. I set my coffee down, stood slowly, and kept my tone even. I appreciate Karen's performance. Truly. The charts, the binder, the courtroom cosplay, it's impressive. But there are a few problems. I pulled a thin folder from under my arm. First, here are photographs of my yard, taken daily for the last 2 weeks. No food, no trash, no attractants. Second, here are screenshots of Karen's posts bragging about demolishing my fence and leaving her koi pond uncovered. Third, here's a copy of the county's official warning to her for attracting wildlife. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I wasn't done. And finally, I said, pulling out my phone, here's audio from the day Karen ordered workers to trespass and chop down my trees. I hit play. Her voice filled the cul-de-sac. These need to come down too. The board agreed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. Then someone in the back muttered, "This is insane." Another whispered, "She's abusing her position." Cheryl, pale as chalk, stood and quietly excused herself. Karen's face was crimson. "This is out of order," she shrieked. "You have no right to record me." I shrugged. Public property line. Perfectly legal. And besides, the HOA bylaws you love so much? They allow documentation in any dispute. Page 47, Section B. Her mouth opened, then closed. She hadn't expected anyone to actually read the bylaws she weaponized. That's when Dave, yes, sandal-wearing, gossip-loving Dave, stood up. "Karen, enough. You've dragged this neighborhood through weeks of chaos. We're tired of it. The bears aren't OP's fault, they're yours. We all know it." Murmurs of agreement rose. A few people even clapped. Karen spun in circles, trying to regain control, but the tide had turned. For the first time, she wasn't the loudest voice, she was drowning under everyone else's. The hearing dissolved into chaos. Neighbors walked out. The men in polos packed up their table, muttering about not signing up for this. And Karen? She stood frozen in her driveway, binder clutched to her chest, her empire crumbling around her. But she wasn't finished. That night, as if the universe itself wanted to punctuate the spectacle, the bear returned. Bigger, bolder, lumbering straight through her open lawn. This time, though, it didn't stop at the koi pond or the trash bins. It went for her back porch, where she had stored several bags of birdseed. With a single swipe, it ripped the door off her storage bin and feasted. Karen lost it. She ran into the street, screaming, waving a flashlight like she was directing air traffic. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones up, recording. The bear ignored her until she got too close. Then, with a lazy swing, it knocked her flashlight out of her hand. She screamed again, tripping over her own feet, and scrambled onto her lawn. Animal control came one last time. But their tone was different now. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly, "this is your third incident. If you can't secure your property, we'll have to issue fines. Real fines. And if it continues, relocation of the bear won't matter, we'll consider relocating you." The crowd gasped. Karen sputtered, demanded they fine me instead, but no one was listening. Even Cheryl avoided her eyes. The next morning, the HOA Facebook page exploded. Neighbors posted videos of the chaos. Memes spread like wildfire. Karen vs. Bear, the trilogy. Someone even edited dramatic music over the clip of her falling in the grass. The comments weren't just mocking, they were angry. People wanted her gone. By noon, a petition had started. Remove Karen as HOA president. Signatures piled up. By evening, more than half the neighborhood had signed. Dave himself slipped the petition under my door with a grin. Thought you'd want the honors, he said. I read every name. Families who'd once feared her. Retirees who'd quietly paid her fines. Even Cheryl's shaky signature sat at the bottom. They weren't just tired of her, they were ready to end her reign. That night, I sat on my porch again, watching the fireflies blink across the dark. My dog dozed at my feet. Somewhere, deep in the woods, I thought I heard a low rumble, the bear, maybe, reclaiming its territory. I felt no fear, because the real predator in our neighborhood had just been cornered. And I knew the final strike was coming. The petition to remove Karen spread faster than crabgrass on an unwatered lawn. By Monday morning, every neighbor with a functioning printer had a copy taped to their mailbox. Kids chalked "by Karen" on the sidewalk. Someone even decorated her driveway with a hand-painted sign that read, "Bears 3, Karen 0. She stormed out in her robe to tear it down, but by then 3 people were live-streaming, so all she managed was to look like an unhinged street performer. I kept quiet. That's how you win wars against people like Karen, not by shouting louder, but by letting them collapse under the weight of their own absurdity. She'd been given enough rope, and she'd braided it into a crown, then strangled herself with it. By Tuesday evening, the HOA board had no choice but to call an emergency vote. It was held in the community clubhouse, a bland beige building with carpet that smelled like mildew. Karen sat at the head table, binder stacked in front of her like a shield, hair shellacked into a helmet. Cheryl sat beside her, avoiding eye contact, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. The room was packed. Folding chairs lined every wall, neighbors squeezed shoulder to shoulder, the air humming with anticipation. Dave, surprisingly sober and serious for once, stood and read the petition aloud. His voice echoed. We, the undersigned residents of Oak Ridge Estates, move to remove Karen from her position as HOA president effective immediately. Karen jumped up, slamming her palms on the table. This is a coup, she shouted. You're all blind to his manipulation. She stabbed her finger toward me. Opie is the true danger. I didn't even flinch. I just stood, lifted a neat stack of papers, and handed them to the board. Exhibits A through D photos, videos, county citations, and recordings of her actions over the past month. The room buzzed as the board members leafed through the evidence. Every photo of her koi pond, every recording of her ordering trees cut, every county warning, it was all there. A board member cleared his throat. Karen, this is substantial. Do you have a defense? She sputtered, flipping her binder open and closed, but the problem with lies is they collapse under daylight. Her binder was a pile of bluster, mine was hard evidence. The vote wasn't even close. By a show of hands, the board unanimously removed her. The room erupted. Some cheered, others clapped politely, a few just sighed with relief. Karen's face went scarlet. She pointed at me again, shrieking, "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but the law is on my side." Then she stormed out, binder clutched to her chest like a life raft. I thought that would be the end of it. But Karen wasn't wired for surrender. The very next morning, I woke to find a thick envelope shoved under my door. Inside, a lawsuit. Karen was suing me personally for emotional distress, property devaluation, and reckless endangerment. The figure she claimed? $200,000. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee down my shirt. She had no fence, no allies, no credibility, but she thought a lawsuit would scare me. I sent it to my lawyer. He called me 5 minutes later, chuckling. This is the weakest case I've ever seen. Honestly, I should frame it. Still, court is court, and Karen loved an audience. When the date arrived, she showed up in a power suit 2 sizes too small, binder in hand, lips pursed like she'd just sucked a lemon. She strutted into the courtroom as though it were her kingdom. The judge, however, was not impressed. My lawyer presented the evidence methodically. Photos, county warnings, recordings, petitions. Karen interrupted repeatedly, waving her binder and shouting, "Lies! Fabrications!" until the judge snapped, Ma'am, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. The knockout punch came when my lawyer played the audio of her ordering the workers to cut down my trees. The courtroom went dead silent. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Mrs. Karen, that's you, correct? Her face crumpled. That's taken out of context. The judge didn't buy it. Within 20 minutes, the case was dismissed. Not only that, the judge ordered Karen to reimburse me for legal fees and damages. The total? Just shy of $30,000. The look on her face as the gavel came down was the closest thing to poetry I've ever seen. News traveled fast. By that evening, the neighborhood group was ablaze with the story. Karen sued OP and lost big time. Karma at last. Memes flooded in. Karen photoshopped in boxing gloves, KO'd by a cartoon bear. You'd think humiliation, debt, and removal from power would have been enough. But Karen had one last trick. Late that night, she tried to sneak back into her old role. She plastered flyers on every mailbox. Emergency HOA reinstatement meeting. Karen's still in charge. She even printed fake letterhead to make it look official. But neighbors had had enough. Not only did no one show up, someone filmed her sitting alone in a circle of folding chairs, binder in her lap, ranting to no one. The video went viral locally, captioned, "Dictator without a country." That was her breaking point. A week later, a moving truck pulled up to her house. She didn't say goodbye, didn't make eye contact, just loaded her binder boxes and koi pond supplies into the back and drove away. The neighborhood exhaled. Kids played outside again. Dave even mowed his lawn without being fined for grass height discrepancies. For the first time in months, Oak Ridge Estates felt like a community, not a prison camp. And me? I rebuilt my fence. Taller this time, reinforced, cedar gleaming in the sun. Neighbors stopped by to compliment it, to thank me for standing up, to joke about charging admission to the bear-proof fortress. But the real kicker came 2 weeks later. I was sipping beer on my porch when the bear appeared again, lumbering out of the woods. It paused at the property line where my new fence stood, sniffed the air, then turned, not toward me, not toward the neighbors, but toward Karen's now empty house. It padded across the abandoned lawn, sniffed at the koiless pond, then lumbered away. I laughed quietly, raising my beer in a mock toast. Karen had wanted open yards. She got them. And the wilderness answered. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I played the long game, stayed calm, and let Karen implode under the weight of her own entitlement. The bear was just the punctuation mark. And if you ever hear someone say HOAs are about community harmony, feel free to tell them about the time one woman demolished my fence, declared war, and ended up losing everything, while a bear walked straight into her yard to close the chapter.